Hi, Misha here, and what the hell, let's talk about Colt's old new old CR6700A4. And this is one I literally just pulled out of the cardboard box 5 minutes ago. So it's still greasy, and we're just gonna check it out. I pulled that out at random. And of course, compare it with my older A4. And this won't be a super duper in-depth video, because this is just kind of initial thoughts and comparisons. And a lot of the differences are going to boil down to markings that I cannot see. But maybe if I don't script the camera too badly, you can see. And for more, you can definitely check out Chris over at Small Arms Solutions, who goes into quite a bit of a breakdown. Although most videos I've seen focus on the new CR6920, the M4 carbine, since I really like my AR15-A4 so very much, I thought let's focus on the 20-inch barreled and fixed stocked rifle. At least for part 1. In part 2, we can talk carbines. So, with no further ado, let's just dive in. So yeah, it comes in the standard Colt cardboard box, at least the one they've been using for well over 10 years. As far as accessories, just like the original AR15-A4, we have a Colt manual, a cable lock, one mag pull, P-mag, 30 rounds. It does not have the cover on it, the lid. And of course the rifle itself comes quite greasy and in a plastic bag, and it has this here chamber flag in it. Otherwise, it's as you see, no hang tags, no anything like that. So with that, let's get this flag out. And now, we will talk about what we do and don't have here, and compare it with the original generation. Originally, the AR-15-A4 was released by Colt in 2014, and it was a long time coming. They had teased it back in 2013, and it was kind of really welcome because it was the first military style rifle since really the 1980s. While they had returned to kind of a military spec carbine after the sunset of the assault weapons ban, it wasn't that easy to get a rifle with all the features. 1/2x28 threading, removable A2 flash hider, bayonet lug, a government profile barrel, meaning kind of slim under the handguards and tapering out to get a little fatter. Also having a 1-in-7 twist rate instead of 1-in-9. Picatinny 1913 rail on top, and a fixed buttstock with storage compartment. Of course, my gun here has been modified some, but mostly just changing the furniture. It's a gun I love to bring out, so yeah, but the stock's original, the grip's original. I put on the Knight's Armament quad rail, and of course I replaced the carry handle with a Maytag rear sight, and more recently finally did put an ACOG on it. It did come from the factory with the ambidextrous selector, which was really its only embellishment. Since these were not released until 2014, they are kind of considered later production examples. But at any rate, so here's our new one. A2 grip, there is a difference here on the markings. Originally, we had the key and forged stamping. On the newer ones, we have the cage code, and we still have the ambi selector, and we do have safe and fire. Now, you'll already notice the earlier ones were roll marked, and for the last 4 or 5 years, Colt has been doing laser engraving. Handguards are the same as originally would have been on mine. They do have the heat shield. Here's our front sight with the standard sling swivel. Here's on mine. And let's do our best to look at some barrel markings here. Again, hopefully I'll get something for you. If not, check out Chris's channel. It still does have the bayonet lug and standard A2 type birdcage. So let's flip these over. So here is my original A4, marked AR15-A4, just like you should. Colt's defense. Again, this is an old enough one, it was still roll marked. Standard A2 lower, except for one thing. Looking at the new production one, we are now, again, laser engraved, marked carbine, still marked Colt's defense. Now we have a QR code, and we have a certain difference in the receiver here. And there's our front sights. So what's going on here? What's the good and the bad externally? Back in September of 2019, Colt made a mistake. They put out a press release saying that they were temporarily suspending civilian production. They said that the market was kind of slow and that they had a backlog of government, police, military contracts. They weren't lying. The market was really slow at the end of the summer of 2019. But this quickly got blown out of proportion with people saying that Colt was no longer going to be producing semi-autos at all. Now, we did try on this channel to say, look, this is a temporary thing, and that's what Colt is saying. Originally, they said they would probably get back to commercial guns in 90 to 120 days. So, January, February of 2020. But, for one thing, things never come up on time. For another, 2020 was a cluster. So, it's not surprising. Plus, of course, Colt ended up being bought out by CZ USA. Nevertheless, in September of 2020, about a half a year after they originally were going to, they relaunched their semi-automatic commercial civilian line under the CR brand name. Now, CR stands for Colt Rifle. CR has been used as a serial prefix by Colt for many, many years. It's not a new one. It doesn't stand for civilian rifle or commercial rifle. It's just Colt Rifle. Yeah, fair enough. Of course, they're trying to consolidate their production line and just have one semi-automatic. Now, the whole law enforcement series, and we'll talk a lot more about this in the M4 video, but originally that kind of dated back to the assault weapons ban, 1994 through 2004. So it was an artifact of that. And now they would go away from the LEO restricted markings to just M4 carbine with an LE prefix serial. And of course, with the A4s up here, like mine, they had a CAR prefix serial, never LE. With the current one, it's CR. And the AR15-A4 became the CR6700A4. And again, 67 yada yada has been a series Colt has used, like for example the 6720, 6721. So it's not a new line, but instead of LE or MT, now we have just CR. So that doesn't really bother me. Another thing, notice on mine and any older Colts, the selector stops are machined off. This is something Colt has done literally since the beginning, 1960s, with the SP1 for their semi-auto guns. Now, they are leaving them on. Which, frankly, if you're being objective, is a good thing. I don't know why they machined them off. But it did kind of become iconic of a Colt receiver. But now they're there. So that's a good thing. They're still marked Colt's Defense. That's also good. The bad things, instead of being marked rifle or A4, now it's just marked carbine because we're using the same lower for all the semi-autos. So no more custom special row markings. Also the laser engraving, a lot of people don't like that, but again, this is something Colt started some years back, long before the CZ buyout and everything else. They claim it's because laser engraving gives a neater, consistent depth, whereas row marking, depending on how it's done, can have kind of deeper indentions in the middle and then kind of fainter on the outside. So cosmetically, some people say they like it more for its consistency. Take it as you will. Other people really complain about the QR codes. I don't blame them, but again, that's just what it is. As for the cage codes, of course, originally, Colt didn't have to mark their ARs or M16s anything back in the 60s because they were the only maker. But when other makers came in beginning in 1968, they started putting a C to designate it was a Colt part. And the government would continue this letter code system up until about 2013 when they started assigning cage codes and number codes to these things. So having a cage code, say on the barrel or receiver, is correct for a 21st century production government contract anything. So it's a change, but it's not really less authentic. It's just a change. Again, these still have 1 in 7 twist, chrome lined bores, and they are still marked MP for magnetic particle tested. So unless Colt's lying, they still are doing them. The furniture is the same, although there's a few things that feel a little cheaper. There's something a little different about the buttstock, but I can't put my finger on it. And I know Chris has talked about the way they attach the heat shields not being fully mil-spec. It's also worth pointing out that one of the big controversies when the AR-15-A4s were around was if you had an F-marked front sight base or not. Back when Colt was still producing fixed carry handle and flat top guns together, they put the F on the front sight base to denote a taller base for a flat top. But Colt has not produced, at least outside of their retro series, which they've never made in Connecticut anyway, a flat top, a fixed carry handle upper in a long time. It's all been flat tops. Colt claims there's no longer a reason to have an F-marked front sight base because they're all designed for a Picatinny receiver. One other good thing I will say, while the majority of A4s that people wanted were the black furniture with the removable carry handle, Colt did do a Magpul version, an FDE, which did not sell very well because this is the look people want. I'm glad they brought this one back, and they are providing a removable carry handle. In fact, this is one of the very few guns you can buy in 2020 into 2021 now that actually comes with this type of carry handle. Not only has Colt dropped it for all other variants, pretty much every other manufacturer has too. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at least externally. With that, let's crack this puppy open. Yeah, I thought it'd be easier just to separate the upper and the lower for this part. Looking inside here, pretty standard for a Colt. We have the web in the back. This is something Colt has done for quite some time, for about 20 plus years, to keep auto sear and whatnot from going in. But it's not all bad, because originally, and before they did that, they actually had the weird front pivot pin that was larger and a screw. At least for the last 20 years, they've been doing true front pins that are the correct diameter. And also to keep people from putting naughty bits in. Up until 2009, they had oversized trigger pin FCG pins in holes. But luckily they quit that nonsense. So really, if our exchange is to have this little web, yeah, frankly, so be it. I don't think it really bugs most people. We have a pretty standard military trigger group. Now, originally, Colt used notched hammers. Now they're just kind of going to a smooth top version. But it is still proofed. Of course, the trigger is pretty standard military-esque trigger. And the buffer is a standard rifle length, rifle weight buffer. As to the upper receiver, we have a standard uncut carrier. And again, pretty standard otherwise. But, yeah, let's pull this out. And one thing that immediately jumps to people is that while they do have C-marked carriers, it's more of a dot matrix marking now. And it is still MP stamped on the bolt, but there are usually subcontractor markings. And we do have staked gas key. And again, this is one I just pulled out at random. So as to the exact markings, they may be different. I mean, physically wise, it's the same, but it doesn't have the same old school Colt markings. And we're still doing the M4 feed ramp, which normally would be considered a negative, but frankly, it's even in the original AR15-A4 as well. And the reason they do it doesn't hurt anything, and it means they can use the same upper receiver and barrel extensions as they do on their carbines. Otherwise, we have this standard port door, standard forward assist, and most of these do have a charging handle with the cage code. But again, throughout these, various subcontractor markings can and do appear, and it can vary, frankly, rifle to rifle. And just to complete the tour, let's pull the handguards off real quick. Standard handguards with the single heat shield. And like I said, the barrel does taper down under them. Of course, I can't see anything, but maybe someone's getting something out of this. I hope. And various subcontractors have been reported for making the barrels or barrel blanks as well. But they are still marked for being magnetic particle tested. And the subcontracted barrel is not anything new with the CR series. These are things, again, that have been reported on Colts for the past 4 or 5 years. So, hopefully you got a bit of a look at it. How does it feel? Well, that's a little hard to convey in a video, but one thing I will give rifles credit for is how much easier it is to get handguards on and off, especially with the Delta ring. So, how does it feel? Well, frankly, pretty much like a Colt. There is minimal play in the handguards, just as you'd expect from a rifle. In fact, actually, just regular side to side. And the upper to lower fit on this one is actually quite good. The rear pin pops out by hand, but the front pin is quite tight, all things considered. I needed a bullet tip to drive it all the way out when I took it apart earlier. Again, it's not perfect, but Colts have never had the best looking finish, and there's always been a little bit of upper-lower play to Colts, even back in the SP1 days. The finish on this one seems to be a very matte finish. It's kind of got a chalky feel to it. Very non-gloss. It seems like my old one here. It's just a little bit shinier. But it could just be use, because I've had it for 6 years. Hard to say, frankly. But just going by the feel test, it doesn't really seem different. So it really comes down to who made the parts in it and the markings, if you like them. As far as how the physical gun feels, the features it has, and frankly, the seeming quality, they're pretty much like the original AR15-A4. So the differences are in the markings. The problem is, that's kind of what people pay for with Colts, are the markings. But this is what we have. And frankly, for someone wanting an M16A4 type gun, there are not that many options on the market today. Everyone and their brother and dog produces M4 carbines, but not many do fixed stock, government profile 20-inch barrels, and that are military style like this, with the buttstock, the handguard, and most importantly, the removable carry handle. And that does bring me to one more point. These aren't exorbitantly expensive. They're kind of priced in there with other middle to mid-upper tier ARs. Hard to say in a video what something's priced at because that changes day to day, week to week, month to month. But yeah, they're not $3,000 or $2,000, let's say. They're floating in the mid to low thousands, which is about where FNs and Daniel Defenses and those are at. Is it a true Colt? Well, who knows? It does come out of the Hartford factory, but Colt's under new ownership, and at least some, if not a majority, even of the parts in here aren't made in that factory. Then again, I could point out that very few factories make all their parts now. Not just in AR-15, but even AK manufacturing. So, if you're wanting something purely for collecting, maybe you do want to go with the older AR15-A4s that are still world marked like that. But, if you're just wanting a shooter in this configuration, and one that's kind of set up for customization out of the box, I don't believe, again, first initial opinion and perception, I don't believe the CR6700A4 will serve you ill. They still seem well-built guns with properly staked parts. The bolt and barrel are still MP marked for testing. Still has a proper mil-spec rail. Still has chrome line bore. Still takes standard furniture. So, I don't see, pun intended, any huge red flags, again, aside from the markings or lack thereof in some cases. So it's up to you if you can live with it. The fact of the matter is the old style Colts are gone, and they've been phasing out for some time. It's not like all of a sudden they changed. They switched from roll mark to laser engraving. They started using more and more subcontracted parts some years ago. And of course, military contracts, especially for the rifles, are drying up. The Marines have retired theirs, and they were pretty much the final user of the A4. And if you'd like to know more on the history of the A4 and specifications and all that good stuff, I did a video earlier this year. So you can check that out, and I'll try to link it in the description as well. So I'd love to know what you think and what markings you might have discovered on yours if you have picked one up. Colt tends to only do the A4 styles once or twice a year, so it's kind of one of those, for a while they're everywhere, and then they dry up and you won't see them for 6 months. I don't know if that's going to be their pattern now with the new management through CZ, but that was the old pattern back when I got mine. So while they aren't necessarily that expensive, they can get hard to find from time to time. So caveat emptor. Well, I do appreciate you tuning in. Please feel free to comment, and as usual, if you could, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll be back next time to check out the carbons. This is Misha. Catch you very soon.